Yo, what's up everyone? Today I want to talk about one of the best Ranger leveling builds for Path of Exile 2's new 0.3 patch. And it's an ice build. It is a ice shot and freezing salvo build that makes leveling a breeze. Now, I've just got to endgame on this, and not only does it have really good single target damage, really good AoE damage, and it's had a lot of buffs and new things coming into this league, it just freezes everything. So you have a big, a big pack of mobs is crawling out of the abyss. You just freeze them all, and the danger is gone. And then you get to a boss, and it's doing its big mechanics. You just freeze it. Now, there's a lot of new bosses in Act 4, and in the interlude that comes after Act 4, there's a lot of bosses as well. And not only are there a lot of bosses, the abyss just swarms mobs at you. Now, lightning is really good for clear speed, but with this build, you can just freeze everything. So let's get straight into this. I'll talk a little bit about how the build works, and then we'll show an early game version before you get all of the abilities, and then a full version once you have all of the ice abilities unlocked. So the way this build works is we are just going all out on ice and freeze and shatter. So we have the main ability where we do a lot of our damage is ice shot. You can see at the end of the campaign, I'm at around 13k damage DPS on ice shot, which is amazing. It does everything. This is just a single target, very fast attack like this. But when we have the freeze and shatter, that then becomes an AoE. Now what we do is we use this ability here, ice tipped arrows, to empower our bow to create ice fragments. And what this does is when we hit an enemy, we will then use this, and then when we hit an enemy with the ice shot, it will then create these ice shards all over the floor that then pop, and we use a support gem to make them pop pretty much instantly, which just means this single target ability is basically an AoE all the time. So you're having your full single target damage and you're having your AoE with full up time. And then the big AoE ability we have is when the abyss starts, throwing out all those monsters, and it's just, the screen is just full of enemies. You throw one of these at them, and everything's frozen. Everything's frozen, and then you just shatter them, and you go get your abyssal chest because there's nothing left. It's amazing. It does tons of damage. It's just so good this league. One of the best abilities we have. And then we also have Barrage. Now, Barrage is when you stack frenzy charges, when you have a few frenzy charges, you pop Barrage, and then it will basically multi-shot your next ability. So you would pop Barrage and then do this, and you just throw out loads more attacks. It's just melts rares. It's really good with a big pack, and you can just go through them all. And then finally we have Snipe. Now the way Snipe works is when you have a rare, an elite, or a boss, as soon as you freeze them, you will do this. You'll snipe, you'll get into position, and you have to time it. So when you time it correctly, you hit them with that, and their health just gets chunked. Rares will just go down. Bosses will just take a massive chunk of damage. So kind of like the premise is like when there's lots of enemies, we just freeze them and shatter them. When there's a boss, we freeze it and shatter it. That's pretty much it, just in different ways. Okay, so this is the full build guide, and I'll link it down below. This is going to have everything you need. We're only like a couple of days into the league, so I'm still trying new things, and I'll update it with any big changes I make. But generally, this is going to have everything you need. Now, there are 3 variants here. We have early for Act 1, we have Act 2 to 3, and then we have like a final build. And the way this works is in the first act, you don't have all of the ice abilities. Some of the ice abilities you need to get a few higher level skill gems to get, so you don't really have everything until you hit Act 2. So in Act 1, we use a mix of ice and lightning, and then once we have our main ice abilities in Act 2, we can switch over to the full ice build. And then, the final build will just be like the perfect version of what you're working towards. It's going to have all the skill gems, all the support gems. So as you start getting new gems, you know what you're working towards. So it should be a really clear way for you to progress through all the different gems and progress as you go through the acts. So hopefully it works well. If you have any questions though, do let me know. So first up, the very early version of the build. Now, I'm not going to go over game. I'm just going to talk gems here because this is the most important part. So in the early game, what you want to do is you want to be using lightning as your main source of damage for Act 1. Now you have lightning arrow. You can put this with rapid attacks. If you played before, this was called martial tempo. They've renamed it to rapid attacks, so it's the same thing. Then you can also go with elemental attunement. Support gems deal 20% more elemental attack damage. Now you might be saying to yourself, well, this feels like a waste. Why am I putting gems into lightning when I'm just going to get rid of it? The best thing is these ones transfer over. So rapid attacks, you're using ice shot. Elemental attunement, you're using ice shot. So you're not actually wasting anything. And the support gems are harder to come by than the main gems. So don't worry about getting the main gems. You'll get plenty of those. And the support gems still go to use. Now, the lightning rod, we can take multi-shot. Again, that also gets used later on. And then we can use concentrated area. This means that when you drop out a lightning rod, it will be in a smaller area, but it will do more damage, and you'll throw out 3 of them at once for better AoE clear. then you can take Herald of Thunder as your first Herald because we're mostly using Herald abilities. So that's what I'd go with. You can also take Innovate for a bit of extra damage. Now, the big juicer, Freezing Salvo. Even though we're playing a lot of Lightning, Freezing Salvo is phenomenal. You want to take this. And the way we have this is this just launches, it counts up, right? So it ticks up to 10. When it hits 10, you'll cast it and it just dumps damage. It freezes everything, deals tons of damage. It feels very, very, very strong. Now, what I would do is I would put Hourglass on it. So the way this works is you can no longer cast it freely. So normally you can just cast it as much as you want. But with this, it goes on a 10-second cooldown. But when those 10 seconds are up, it does 30% more damage. Now, that just means we use this on cooldown. As soon as those 10 seconds are up, use it again, and you're just pumping out amazing amounts of damage every 10 seconds. We'd also go with, again, Elemental Armament. Then there's a new change in 0.3. If you didn't watch like the big reveal, there's a new change in 0.3 that we can use the same support gems on different skill gems. So you're going to see this in a lot of places. You're going to see like Martial Tempo against rapid attacks in lots of different places because they're very good support gems that work across different things. Now, Ice Tipped Arrows is beautiful. This is, you charge this and then your next bow skill will drop these ice fragments. And if you've used this before and you think it's kind of bad, that's because of this. When they drop them, there is a delay on when the ice fragments go off. So you might not ever see that damage, or it might be like too delayed. So what we do is we use Short Fuse. So Short Fuse is 40% less time for this to go off, which means as you have a big group of mobs and you're hitting them with your arrows, this will then start popping off while they still have a good amount of health, and you'll see it get chunked down, and you'll get the most out of the Ice Tipped Arrows. We also go with Multi-Shot, so we get more of them. And then you can use this ability here. Now, this isn't the biggest damage, right? It's not crazy damage. But what it does do is if you hover over it, it does a good chunk of damage, but then it also does Cold Exposure. It says, chills enemies as though dealing 300% more damage, and it applies Cold Exposure, which makes them take more cold damage, which is fantastic. We take Short Fuse again, so that goes off faster. So this way it places a circle on the ground, it ticks, and then it pops off and applies everything. This makes that go off faster. When you've got bosses jumping around the screen, you're likely going to miss with this, so this makes sure you miss less. Magnified area, bigger area, get more of a pack. You drop it near an abyss, you'll get more mobs in the abyss. So that's the early game. Okay, once we get to Act 2, we can go into the full ice build. We can get all of the ice abilities, and we can just drop lightning, and we go freeze, shatter, massive damage, and fun. If you're thinking about switching over, if you've played lightning a little bit, fancy a change, anything after Act 2 is great. As soon as you have Ice Shot, you're good to go. So we'll talk through this. I'll show it in game because it's easier. But one thing I do want to talk about is the support gems. So there was a change coming into this new 0.3 patch where support gems ranked up. So you would use a rank 1 support gem and you would get, for example, rapid attacks, right? And that gives you 15% attack speed. Once you get, maybe it's like a rank 3 or a rank 4 support gem, you could get rapid attacks 2, which is an upgraded version. And you then have 25% increased attack speed. So going through the better ranks gives you much more damage and much more power, and everything's good. I just want you to be aware of what happens when you go to the 3rd version, because a lot of the time it upgrades the effect, but it has a negative attached to it. So you can see here, when we get to Rapid Attacks 3, we get 35% increased attack speed, which is great, but then we lose 50% damage. So I just want you to be very, very careful when you're upgrading, not to just blindly rank up all your skills. So yeah, a lot of the time in this guide, I'll show, like in the final version, I'll show things at like rank 2 instead of rank 3, and you'll be like, well, I'm just going to upgrade. Be careful, because a lot of the time you're losing damage. So yeah, I just want to make you aware because I don't think that's very clear. But I'm going to get into game and show this because it's much easier to see, and there's still updating some things on here, so you've got little things missing. So in game, here we go. So the first thing is Ice Shot. Ice Shot is our main source of damage that we cast when everything else is on cooldown. So we want to be getting a lot of damage into this. We want to go with Rapid Attacks 1, upgrade it to Rapid Attacks 2 when you can. This is attack speed, the martial tempo from before. Elemental Armament, more elemental attack damage, upgrade it to 2 as soon as you can. Cold Attunement, 25% extra damage. This is the first thing I would upgrade to 3 gems. So if you're brand new to PoE 2, I'll go to my stash. When you get one of these things here, a Lesser Jeweler's Orb, you can use that. You just right click it and use it on a skill, and you can then get a 3rd slot. First thing I would do is Ice Shot. So That's what I do. In order, I'd actually go Ice Shot, then I would go Freezing Salvo, then I would go Ice Tipped Arrows, and then I would finally go for probably Herald of Ice. That's the order I'd go for. Anyway, Ice Shot, that's Ice Shot explained. Ice Tipped Arrows, this is our, we buff our attack before we do it. So we buff our arrows and then they create ice fragments. Here I would go for Multi-Shot. You know, you get 3 instead of 1. I'd go for Short Fuse 2, which gives you 80% less detonation time, which is massive. You're really going to feel that. And then I would go for Cooldown Recovery to get it off cooldown as fast as possible. Herald of Ice, I would switch over to as soon as we move fully into the ice build. As soon as we have Ice Shot, I would move into Herald of Ice instead of Lightning Herald, Herald of Thunder. Herald of Ice, the way this works is after you shatter an enemy, it makes like a chain reaction that damages everything around it. So freezing and shattering becomes much better. So with that, I would go for Concentrated Area. So you get more damage, but in a smaller area. I would go for Frozen Spite. So they drop ice fragments when you defeat a frozen enemy. And we're going to be defeating frozen enemies because that's kind of how the build works. And then finally, I'd go for Overreach for 40% increased area of effect, which then counteracts the 50% less area of effect we have here. So we end up with kind of the same-ish area of effect and a lot more damage. Okay, Freezing Salvo. We go for Hourglass for the cooldown. We go for Elemental Armament, upgrade it to Elemental Armament 2 when you can. And then finally, Freeze. 50% more freeze build up. This, you know, this is like our main source of freezing big packs. The Abyss forms, all the enemies are coming out. You just launch all your little icicles at them. They all freeze. You shatter them. That causes a chain reaction, and it's just over. It's amazing. Okay, now Barrage, the way this works is we consume a Frenzy Charge to fire additional times. Now, in here, I don't have any gems right now because I'm changing things around, but you want to do this. You want to go into here, you want to put in charges, and you want to take both of these. You want to take Heightened Charges and Perpetual Charges. I'm just trying a different build at the minute, and I took them out, but that's what you want to be going for. This basically just gives you more charges and gives them a better chance to do more damage. So you want to take both of those. Then you want to go on to Snipe. Snipe is our big single target damage dealer. The downside of Snipe is this: 1, 2, 3. You're stood still for like 2 or 3 seconds. So you can only really use this when there's one mob and he's frozen, like a boss or a big rare. You're not going to really be using it in the open when there's mobs running at you. So for that reason, you want to get Hourglass. It gives it a 10-second cooldown, so it makes it more situational. When you do use it, you get 30% more damage. Then I'd go for Burgeon, 20% more damage for every second you spent channeling. And like we said, it's like 2 or 3 seconds of channeling, so it's 2 or 3 seconds of extra damage. Then Combat Frenzy, gain a Frenzy Charge when you freeze an enemy every 6 to 6.9 seconds. That goes down the more you level this up. And that's how we get our Frenzy Charges early on. Like I say, you don't get loads, so I'm kind of moving away from, I'm trying a few things coming into, I'm trying to make the end game version of this and push maps. So yeah, we'll see where that goes. But the leveling, it's more than enough. It feels great. But that's pretty much everything. You also want to get Wind Dancer in Act. You get this after Act 4, so it's not really a leveling thing. But once you get out of Act 4, there is a interlude of 3 different maps. And what you want to do is start here. Start on the 3rd map, because this is where we get our the final spirit upgrade. So you get like 30 spirit, then 60 spirit in Act 3, and then you get the last 40 in this interlude 3rd map. So I'd start there, and I would go and get Wind Dancer. It gives you evasion, and that's defensive, so you don't drop as much in fights. But that's pretty much everything. Like I say, this is very raw. 2 days into the league. It needs a lot of refining. It needs a lot of min-maxing for pushing endgame, and I'm going to be working on that. But for leveling, it's more than enough. It's fantastic for leveling. The ability to freeze enemies is just amazing. But that's pretty much everything. Okay, now let's talk about the passive tree. So again, it's in the build guide if you want to look at it that way, but I'll show you what you want to be doing with the passive tree. So we would start here, we would run it along here, we'd go and get the projectile damage, we'd get the speed and attack damage, we'd get the pierce and projectile, we'd come along here. I would say change these nodes here to strength or intelligence as you feel you need to hit. You're going to have different gear than me, so I'm not going to say exactly which ones to get, because if you pick up a piece of gear that has 20 strength on it, you don't need that strength node, right? So change these as you need them, because some of the things we use are int required and some of the support gems are strength required. So make your own judgment there. Come along down here and get this cluster down here. This is, damage pierces elemental resistances. And if you don't know, if a monster has elemental resistances, you deal less damage to them with your elements, and we need to do cold damage, so we need that. come along here and grab this node here, movement speed and evasion. Come along here, get a gem socket, put in whatever gems you can find while leveling. Down here, increased elemental damage with attacks, and come along here, and you want to go up to this cluster here, 25% increased attack damage and chance to maim on hit. And then down to here, I would wrap around and grab this cluster here for more movement speed and more skill speed, which is just, more attack speed. And then I would come up here and get these herald nodes. You've got 40% increased cold damage with Herald of Ice, which is massive. And then I would probably stop. I would probably stop here while leveling. Stop at that node there when you've got your coming Calamity Herald nodes. Then I would come along here and I would work my way up here. So work your way up here, get that cluster here, damage for each elemental ailment on an enemy, and then work our way up to here. Damage penetrates cold resistance, cold resistance, cold resistance, and then finally, damage penetrates 15% cold resistance, which is massive. Work our way up, and we can get this cluster here, attack damage, 24% attack damage, and blind enemies. And then we can come up to here, and we get attack damage, and then chance to daze. So we're doing lots of different ailments on the enemies, and we're getting more and more and more attack damage. Once you have all of that done, then I'd come back to here, and I would go into this cluster here to get deflection, which is a new mechanic coming into 0.3. And deflection is, if you hover over it, it's a chance to deflect damage from hits. So we have the evasion, so we try and evade the hit, and then if we do take the hit, we have a chance to deflect it. So it's a good little cluster to get. Like I said, I would go in here later on, once you stack 3 maybe, because you'll be fine until then. Whenever you've got the points to get into here, come down, grab these deflection nodes, then come along to here. And I just ran straight along here. So this line here is known to be stack dex and then get attack speed the more dex you have. So I just run along here, grab this for increased evasion rating, deflection rating, 8% more dex. This node here is 25 dex. And then as we come all the way along, we have attack speed, and then 1% attack speed per 25 dex. That means you'll have tons and tons of attack speed. There's one node here will get you a gem as well. And then finally, the ascendancy on the passive tree is, I went for Deadeye, so I'll talk about that. On Deadeye, you can go down here, skill speed, Tailwind. Tailwind is beautiful while leveling. It basically, you gain a buff, which gives you increased movement speed, and skill speed, which is your attack speed, basically, and you get increased evasion. So this is just amazing. As long as you don't get hit, you don't lose it. When you do get hit, it resets. It's really, really, really nice while leveling. Then I went up here, and I got point blank. Projectiles deal increased hit damage to targets in the first few meters of their movement. Scaling down, the more they go. So that's quite a nice damage increase. This is a really nice setup. Now, the third place I'm probably going to go is into Cold Shots, which gives you a new skill on your ability, which is a persistent skill, which is where you probably don't want that. Personally, while leveling, I didn't use it while leveling. If you think you might want to try it while leveling, go for it. But I went with this setup while leveling, and I'm going to go here as my third option. Again, move it around as you want. This is also a really good one. Shoot an additional projectile, which works really, really well. So again, haven't tested it. Still very fresh. I'm level 68. So that's where I am. Okay, now let's talk about gearing. Now, obviously, the main thing is just keep your gear up to date. The higher level your gear, the more stats it can have on it. So if you have a helmet at level 10, it might have 100 evasion. If you have a helmet at level 50, 60, it has 600 evasion. So getting things at a high level will give you more stats. Very important. Craft them where you can. I'm gonna have a mini crafting guide out very soon to help you with crafting while leveling. But try and craft and do some things to your gear as you level to have more stats on them. Try and get your resistances up. You can see it 29% lightning resistance. Try and get your resistances up. Every time you go through an act, your resistances go down. So make sure you're getting resistances. But the big thing is damage. Here's where you want to be going for on damage. Now, first thing, your bow. On your bow, you want to be getting as much physical damage as possible. Now, this one here has 190% physical damage, which is lovely. You want to get as much physical damage as possible. And then you want to get cold damage. Now, I didn't have this while leveling, obviously. This is an endgame one that I've just crafted and just worked on. But while leveling, just get on with the most damage you can get. Get on with as much physical damage as possible. You can get a twin bow if you want, which will shoot 2 arrows at once. That is quite good for clear speed and for having for packs. But I would just go for one with as much damage as possible. The highest physical damage as possible, because we convert physical to cold. So that's why we want physical. We convert physical to cold. Then added cold damage works really well. Attack speed works really, really well, and crit works well. That's what I'd go for. On the gems in these, I would go for iron runes because that gives you more physical damage. They are the most pricey if you're trying to trade for them. So you can also put in things like lightning or cold or whatever you've got on hand. Just chuck in for extra damage. On the quiver, you want to go for physical damage to attacks. You want to go for increased attack speed. The big one is levels to projectile skills, which is really, really good. And then cold damage to attacks works really well on the quiver. Now, when it comes to rings, on rings, you want to also try and get cold damage to attacks. My rings are terrible. They're still my leveling rings. You can also get increased cold damage. You can get resistances on them as well, which is fine. Any sort of like damage, physical or cold, work really well on your rings. And again, the same thing on your hands. You want to get increased cold damage on your hands and attack speed on your hands. On the legs, you just want movement speed. I think that at low levels, you get like 10%. High levels, like 25%. So yeah, that's it. My gear is a massive, massive work in progress. It's really bad. So I've just got a decent bow, but generally everything else is bad. So I'm not going to show everything, but that's kind of, try and keep your, evasion as high as possible while leveling. Try and keep your resistances up as you go through the axe, and try and get a good bow, a good quiver, and good rings. By crafting, by picking them up, or once you get to Act 4, you can trade with the Angie if you want. Yeah, that's gearing, and that's pretty much everything there is to say. This is a leveling build. I don't want to yap on for too long. I'll try and get an end game version of this coming as soon as possible. But if you have any questions or if there's anything I've missed, let me know down below. Yeah. Thank you for watching. Subscribe if you want to see more. If you like this style of guide, if you like how this is laid out, let me know. But thank you so much. Take care, and I'll catch you in the next one.